Good afternoon, superintendents, and all of those in attendees. I hope everyone is doing well today. Thank you for joining us. We recognize that you're taking time out of your school day and your very busy schedules to listen in, and we're grateful for your participation in today's webinar. We have approximately 45-minute presentation for you today. And the purpose of this presentation is to introduce you to the teams that you will commonly interact with throughout the grant cycle, and to discuss some of the key timelines and requirements for a successful grant. We understand that some of the slides might get a little bit more into detail, so we ask that you bear with us as we do have a lot of information to share in a very limited time. Our plan is to post this webinar on our website so that whether you're familiar with the process or you're just getting started, with the grant applications, that you can access the webinar as you need it. Our intent is to provide these information sessions on an annual basis. So this is something that you can look forward to hopefully in the near future. A poll question will be sent out at some little later in the presentation to basically seek some further clarification from the superintendents as to the time of year that is best suited for these information sessions. We would love to have you in attendance throughout the year. So if you have preference, whether the springtime or the winter time is better, we definitely ask that you answer the poll question so that we can better tailor our future presentations to accommodate your schedules. We will have a Q&A function during the webinar, so that function will be available to you. Depending on the duration of the webinar, we will also do our best to answer those questions throughout the hour. Please note that project-specific questions or those that are a bit complex in nature should be sent directly to the Grants Administration mailbox. Okay, so we're going to give you a little bit of a program overview, and we'll get started here. So the Office of Grants Administration, who we are and what our responsibilities are. We also have our Office of Legal Affairs and Policy and Procurement team as well here today, our Plan Review team, and also the Chief Administrative Officer. Next slide, please. So for those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Yadira Gonzalez, and I am currently the Director of the Grants Administration team. I work with a team of 5 very talented and skilled personnel, but as you can tell, it's a very small group, but we do a lot of work gets done between the 5 team members. So we have Michelle Dixon, who's our education consultant, Heather Pettit. You've maybe seen a significant amount of emails coming from her. She is our grants and contract specialist. Mr. Robert Facito, an accounting specialist, Mr. Tamer Hijaz, who's an accountant, and Mr. Thomas Rowe, who's our education services assistant. Okay, so what are the roles of the Office of Grants Administration? We get these questions a lot because there's different groups that we work with. So we primarily accept and review all of the construction grant applications. We issue your grant commitment letters, and we set up the grants in our financial systems. We manage the grants throughout the life of the school construction project. We process estimated and final payment requests. And as you may already know, our very small team does support 169 districts, 17 regional districts, and 16 regional education service centers, as well as 3 endowed academies. The OGA is responsible for monthly reporting, some quarterly reportings, and also the capital project fund, as you may receive those emails from Heather asking for financial numbers. So we do have a lot of responsibilities within this very small group. Next slide, please. So as far as your grant applications, you may be aware that we have 2 types. We have our priority list applications. Those are accepted annually between July 1st and June 30th. We complete the applications received by June 30th, and those that are accepted will be submitted to the legislature by December 15th of that year. And that would help the legislature up in the next coming cycle, the legislative cycle. The OGA issues the grant commitment letters once the legislature authorizes that priority list. That's generally between June and July, depending on whether it's a short or long session. Districts seeking inclusion on the following year's priority list must submit applications that meet all requirements by June 30th. Applications missing key components such as verified local funding or certified referendum results, if applicable, will be deemed incomplete. For the non-priority applications, these applications are accepted on a monthly basis between the 1st and the 10th of each month. As of July 1st, you may have become aware that now the HVAC program has been integrated as part of the non-priority applications. So you can also apply for those on a monthly basis during those open events. Applications are generally reviewed within 30 days. However, similar to the priority list, it is important that you note that any missing key components will cause a delay in your applications. Unlike the priority list applications, however, the non-priority, if there are missing components, you will be able to apply during the following month's open event. So if you missed October, you have the opportunity to come back in the November event with any supplemental information and get right back into that queue. So it's important to note that you do have that opportunity to come back during the next month. Now, some tips for the application submissions. Superintendents must submit the applications. This has been a requirement through legislation and continues to be that way. So it's important to note that only the superintendents should be submitting these applications. We ask that you give yourself some time before the deadlines to submit your applications. We could encounter some technical issues that can be outside of the OGA's control and DAS as a whole. So it's important that we try to get the applications in before that final deadline. We do have a application checklist. There's an excerpt, as you can see in the slide, with, depending on the type of application you are seeking, it has some good information and details for the districts to be able to just do their checks to make sure that as they're putting their application into the core system, they have included those key components that we mentioned earlier. These links are not only available on the webinar that we're going to be giving you, but they're also going to be available and are available on our DAS grants website. And just as a note, please know that all of the materials here, you will have references at the end of the slides. So please feel free to use those as those resources as they are available to you. Next slide, please. So payment requests. Only superintendents, much like the applications, the superintendents are the only ones who generally can submit payment requests. Recently, the DAS has implemented a policy where the superintendents can designate one municipal employee to submit those requests on their behalf. We do understand that superintendents have very busy schedules, and there is a lot of data collection that is necessary when payments are being submitted. So we understand that sometimes they need assistance, and that's why we encourage you to assign another municipal employee if that is better suited for you. Requests are generally processed within 30 business days, provided that there are no questions or concerns with your payment submissions. Final payment requests require certifications that must be completed by the superintendent or their approved designee, and that's also, again, within their core system, our financial system. Our review process throughout that month, just so you're aware, we do have several levels of review. We have an initial reviewer, we have a second reviewer, your director, myself, also reviews these payments, and then at times the state comptrollers. So the payment requests are vetted significantly, and that's why it is, once again, very important that the information is accurate and complete upon submission to prevent any further delays. We can present a quick slide on the checklist and what it entails for your reference, but again, all of the links are available to you. And here is the checklist. So as you can see, we have our standard 1046 form. You may be already familiar with it. We require the signed invoices, and basically, depending on the type of payment, whether it's an estimated or a final, this checklist will really assist in the information that should be submitted at that time. At the end of this checklist, you will see that there's also some common errors and how to fix them, or at least links to correcting them. Thank you so much, Melissa. Record retention requirements and audit. So districts must maintain documentation for audit readiness. Form 3075 provides a full list of what those records should be. The records do include planning, bidding, and invoice documents. Audits. After the OGA receives a final payment request via your 1049-F, formerly known as the ED 1049-F, including all cumulative grant payments and reporting of ineligible costs, the OGA will then transfer that grant file to the audit team. So once my team has done their review and of your final payments and we're done with it, we transfer it over to the audit team. When your project has been transferred to audit, it is important to know that we are unable to provide a status on that project until the audit is complete. If you have any questions regarding your project and it is in audit, we have provided their audit mailbox so that you can refer your questions there. Communication. So to help ensure clear communication, consistent guidance, and streamlined collaboration, we encourage superintendents to coordinate directly with the OGA team. You may submit your questions to the DAS Grants Administration mailbox. And please note that the OGA does not respond to inquiries from third-party vendors. As the district is in charge of the project, it's important that we communicate directly with you. It avoids confusion and misunderstanding. So it's definitely important that you understand that when you see emails from us that says we don't communicate with third-party vendors, that is why. We encourage you to continue to work with us as we will with you in providing the support that you need throughout your project. Again, please see all the resources and the slides on our website for general information. Along with this, what we hope to be the annual webinar going forward for you, we also issue periodic newsletters and announcements. Now, superintendents, I understand that you are probably receiving a little bit more than you are used to at this point, but it is important to note that it's part of what you should be expecting from us going forward. We put out different announcements. Please know that you're not being excluded in any way, but it's going out to everyone. So these are really helpful tips and guidelines to help you throughout the year with the projects that you have with us. So you can look forward to much more communication from the OGA group. And okay, and with that, I will give you over to Miss Amy LaChance in our legal department.
Thanks, Yadira. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy LaChance. I'm a staff attorney with the Office of Legal Affairs, Policy, and Procurement for the Real Estate and Construction Services Division here at DAS, but I primarily work with the school construction grant teams. I don't have my own team, although some of you may be familiar with my agency legal director, Jenna Padula, who also helps out with the school construction grant program. So I'll take a few moments to introduce myself. I have worked for the state for nearly 17 years. I started as a nonpartisan legislative attorney at the state legislature for 4 years, then spent 10 years at the Department of Banking. And for the past 2.5 years, I have been here at DAS. And before law school, I worked for a couple of local public school systems in support roles, and I appreciate the work that you all do, and I'm happy to be part of the teams here administering this grant program. I mainly support the teams in a legal and compliance function, and I'm going to share some information about the legislative and regulatory framework of our program. Generally speaking, there are 3 sources for the rules of the grant program: our statutes, regulations, and the annual school construction bill. You may often hear us refer to Chapter 173, which contains the group of statutes in which the legislature established the grant program. Chapter 173 sets forth the basic parameters of the program, including who is eligible, what is eligible, how reimbursement rates are determined, and the contracting requirements. These statutes are available online through the legislature's website, which I linked on this slide. But keep in mind that the website may not always be updated with the latest statutory changes, so you may need to consult your local attorneys for the most accurate language. So Chapter 173 also requires the agency to establish regulations with more details of the grant program requirements. DAS inherited the current regulations, which were established by SDE when that agency administered the grant program. And the regs have not been updated substantively in years, and in some cases, decades. The current regulations can be found on the Secretary of the State's e-regs portal, which I also linked on this slide. And they start at section 10-287C-1. Earlier this year, DAS submitted a proposal to update the regulations and incorporate some legislative directives. The proposal was open for public comment last spring, and we are currently working internally to revise the proposal with the public feedback we received before we submit it to the legislature for approval. You can also find that proposal and accompanying information on the eRegs portal, and on the second bullet you'll see a path to getting that information. So stay tuned on that. Finally, every year the legislature passes a school construction bill, sometimes as a standalone bill, but sometimes incorporated into a larger bill like the state bond bill. The annual school construction bill is where the legislature authorizes priority list projects and certain cost increases that are beyond the scope of what our commissioner can approve administratively. In addition, the annual school construction bill usually also contains various special provisions known as notwithstandings that modify grant requirements for specific projects or districts. DAS generally takes a neutral position on notwithstandings, but we will work with the Education Committee when requested to review the language. So I help the grant teams navigate all of this. I help them understand and implement legislative changes and the annual notwithstanding provisions. I also help the teams communicate with districts generally and on certain specific project-related questions. I work closely with our agency legislative liaison, who fields many questions from legislators and legislative staff on our program and often on specific projects in their districts. We do endeavor to respond to you and your legislative delegations timely, but often the questions we receive may be novel or unique and require time for us to deliberate internally to ensure we are administering the program in line with the legislative and regulatory framework before we respond. And that's all I have. So I am going to turn it over to Nick Ross, our Director of Plan Review.
Thank you, Amy, for that overview of the legislative framework defining the grant program. Hello, superintendents and other attendees. I want to take a moment to thank you all again for what you do for your communities, your districts, and the K-12 students in our state. I can only imagine how much you're juggling, and I don't expect hearing about DS plan review processes is at the top of your list. But these processes do matter to ensure you're able to move your building projects forward smoothly through the grants program, so you can stay focused on what really matters: your students, your staff, and your school. That said, let's meet the plan review team. You're likely familiar with most of them, and I'm not sure whether you can see them on here, but we have Angela Gelanu, our invaluable administrative assistant, and our 4 registered architect plan reviewers: Andrea Boyle, Robert Selmer, Barbara Fabiani, and Kermit Thompson. This team is passionate about providing thorough and consistent reviews, and they aim to keep the success of your projects front and center. And lastly, I'm Nicholas Ross, and I'm excited to be part of this team and to help make our processes more user-friendly so you can spend more time on your core mission. Next slide. Now, where does plan review fit in? Um, Prior to receiving a grant commitment, most of your communication is with the OGA team. However, around the time of application, we encourage districts to schedule a design conference with plan review. This is where we will introduce school districts and their design teams to the plan review requirements and expectations of the grant program, covering documentation, compliance, and eligibility guidelines. After the grant commitment letter is issued, the bulk of your communication will shift from OGA back to plan review. At that point, we'll be working with you to ensure your project goes to bid without compromising eligibility for reimbursement under the grant program. Next slide. And before getting into what we do, a reminder. Our program requirements are primarily applied to determine the eligibility of costs for reimbursement, not to dictate what you can or cannot include in your projects. With that said, plan review handles the design-related portions of the grants program requirements. We're assessing building and site aspects to provide approval and reviewing project costs for eligibility. We also issue the approval to go to bid letter, giving your projects the green light for eligibility to advertise for construction. And finally, we review change orders for eligibility following their execution by your project team, which, by the way, must be submitted to our office within 6 months of initiation. Next slide. A few things to keep in mind on the program's design-related requirements. We're now able to provide you with a desktop site review, expediting the process by eliminating the need for site visits.
My apologies. I think we may have had a slight technical issue with Mr. Ross. If you would be patient with us for just a minute, I think he's going to be able to join in a second. Again, my apologies. Just another minute here. Again, one of those things that are generally out of our control is technology. Did we also lose Melissa?
I apologize. Apparently I froze and can you hear me now? Am I back on the meeting?
Yes, you're back on.
Yes.
Um, can anybody tell me where I froze for you all?
One second. I think Melissa somehow is not
Was-
on we're not seeing the presentation at the moment. And it
Oh,
looks like
okay.
it may not have just been you because it looks like we dropped a lot of people. So we're letting them back in.
Okay.
Again, our apologies on the technical difficulties. Yes, it looks like a lot of people unfortunately must have gotten dropped somehow. So they're all trying to rejoin. So we're just gonna get everyone admitted here and give Melissa the opportunity to bring the slides back on.
Hey everyone. I think the internet went down here at our building for a minute or so, but I'm gonna pull the slides back up here and then we'll take a second. And then Nick, maybe you can pick up where you left off.
Yeah,
We're sorry about
absolutely.
that and we appreciate everyone's patience.
It's okay, Melissa. It looks like a lot of people somehow dropped off as well because we're admitting a lot more people now. So the numbers went down and now they're trying to pick up. So it may not have just been the internet in the building. Maybe there's just something else going on that we're not aware of. Okay. But I'll just keep admitting as you keep going, Nick. Sorry, so that we're not holding up
Sh
those currently in the meeting.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. And should I start over here? I don't know exactly where
Sure,
I
you
got
can
cut
just pick up
off.
here. No worries, you can
Um,
just pick up here.
yeah. So the design related portions of the program, a few things to keep in mind on the program's design related requirements. We're now able to provide you with a desktop site review, expediting the process by eliminating the need for site visits. And to further streamline the process, site approval is only required for projects with site acquisition. And we also provide renovation designation for applicable projects. And keep in mind here, renovation has a specific definition that differs from the generic term for rehabilitations on an existing building. There are scope and age requirements that must be validated by DAS in order to receive the renovation designation. Our team also verifies space standards compliance and issues associated waivers or exemptions. Again, be aware here that our program does not dictate the size of your school, but from an eligibility standpoint, we must apply an adjustment to your reimbursement percentage if your building area exceeds the regulatory space standards area. And this value is calculated primarily based on the expected student population and the school's grade range. For code compliance, we rely on your local officials' approval to verify that the design meets building, fire, and accessibility requirements. Again, our program requires verification of various design elements. And while we don't have the time to get into the details today, I'll touch on this a little bit as we move into some of the recently implemented plan review updates. Next slide, if you can. Hope it works. Oh, wonderful. Now, first is the design conference. And to help present the plan review portion of our program consistently and in a more digestible way, we're using a new beta version of a standardized design conference agenda intended to also serve as a resource you can reference throughout the plan review process. Design conferences should be scheduled around the time you're applying for a grant. either before or soon after. You can reach out to our shared email inbox to get this going. At a design conference, our team will delve into and explain the plan review process in detail. The next slide. On to space standards. Moving forward, the space standards compliance, waiver, and exemption processes will be guided by our brand new user-friendly form. It's designed to handle the entire process, from compliance verification, waiver and exemption requests, outlining of backup documentation requirements, and is further used to provide the formal disposition from DAS back to your district. And I'm confident this will provide more clarity to all parties and reduce the turnaround time for DAS approval from months to days. Next slide. Over the past 2 years, we've refined our internal standard operating procedures for state change order reviews to improve process flow and consistency across projects. We've also set clear backlog reduction targets, and the team has successfully reduced our backlog by over 85%. This project progress means your districts can move forward with final grant application requests for many projects that were previously held up. And looking ahead, we've established a 90-day review turnaround goal to continue to support you and your projects in a timely manner. We're also developing standardized state change order review guidance following a format similar to the new design conference agenda, making it easier for your districts and design teams to understand and prepare for the submittal and review process. So look out for this in the future. And speaking of the future, we're working towards a plan review process that's even more streamlined and predictable, so you can stay focused on the many other challenges coming at you every day. And while this will take time and effort, we've laid out some of the specific actions we're taking to get there. Things like improved clarity and form usability, reduced quantity of required paperwork, updating processes, accelerating review turnarounds, and standardized meeting agendas. Now for your districts, this will mean less paperwork, easier and faster form completion, quicker approvals, and more transparency. As I outlined previously, some of this is already underway. And now we'll get into some specific examples comparing what OGA and plan review handle. So this slide is intended to help clarify which responsibilities fall under OGA and which are handled by plan review, so you know where to direct specific requests or questions. For example, OGA issues grant commitment letters, which formally accept your grant. And later in the process, our architects conduct a final plan review, which is typically necessary to ensure eligibility before a project can move into the bidding and procurement phase. And while OGA and plan review are led separately, you can think of us as one coordinated group working towards the same goals. And no matter who you reach out to first, as Amy mentioned, we'll collaborate behind the scenes to make sure you get the information or assistance you need. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for your time. And now I'll hand things over to Melissa Conway to continue the presentation.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Nick. I'm Melissa Conway. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer here at DIS. I'm here for a few minutes to move a little bit away from grants and to talk about a different topic, which is the reporting requirements for indoor air quality and heating, ventilation, and air conditioning inspections and evaluations that districts are required to conduct. So we've heard some questions from you all, and we thought we'd take this time while we're with you to talk about these requirements. Wanted to mention that the requirements around these evaluations have changed over the last few years, which is when our agency, DAS, was added to the mix. Our role, DIS's role, is limited to collecting the forms from your districts to confirm compliance with the inspection and evaluation requirements. So in the next 2 slides, I'm going to share some basic statutory information on the requirements as well as what you need to do to be compliant. So let's start with the annual indoor air quality reporting. Just a little bit of background on this. The legislature has required school districts to perform periodic evaluations of indoor air quality for many years now. But in 2023, they made this requirement an annual requirement, and they added DAS as the agency that's responsible for collecting this reporting information. The law requires districts to conduct inspections of indoor air quality within their schools using the Environmental Protection Agency's Tools for Schools program. This went into effect last year, and since then, it must be done annually for each school in your district. So, how do you complete this requirement? First, you have to complete 6 EPA Tools for Schools checklists for each school in your district. Then you're to make the checklist available at a regular Board of Education meeting, as well as to post the checklist on your Board of Education and school website. After that's complete, you complete the DAS form, which we've linked here, and you'll receive it in the slides and also in a follow-up email. And this is similar to an attestation that you've done your Tools for Schools checklist for the year. If you're wondering about which 6 checklists you need to do, they're available when you click this link to the DAS form. We understand this process is a bit cumbersome, but the statute specifically requires districts to use the EPA's Tools for Schools program, and it also specifically requires districts to post the checklist publicly. So I've included an example of one of the checklists, the ventilation checklist here. This is one of the 6 that your district is required to do. A few other things I want to share about this annual form and reporting requirement. DAS does not need the actual Tools for Schools checklist. We can't compare your information across districts, nor do we have the expertise to analyze the checklist. We're simply the administrator of this process. The second thing that I want to mention is the Tools for Schools program and the checklists are intended to be completed by in-house staff at your school. So teachers, superintendents, your facilities team. Our understanding is that the legislature did not intend for districts to hire someone to help them meet this requirement. They intended for it to be done with your own in-house staff. And while we at DAS want to be as helpful as possible on this, we are not experts on indoor air quality, but we did include resources from the EPA's Tools for Schools website that will hopefully be helpful to you in completing these checklists. So there's a link here to the EPA resources, and this includes fact sheets and backgrounders that go along with each checklist and will help you complete them. So moving on to the 5-year inspection for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. So this law requires districts to complete an inspection of the HVAC system within each school by a certified official every 5 years. I want to get into the details a little bit more on the timeline of this one. So the requirement to inspect HVAC every 5 years was a new law that was added back in 2022. It initially required districts to have all schools inspected by January 1, 2024, and then that date was changed later to 2025. After hearing even more feedback from school districts and advocates, the legislature ultimately changed the timeline to a phased-in approach, where districts have to complete at least 20% of their inspections by June 30th, 2027, and then 20% in each following year so that all schools are inspected by June 30th, 2031. So the key dates there are June 30th, 2027 is when your district needs to have at least 20% of your schools inspected. And then June 30th, 2031, when all schools need to be inspected. Going forward, schools must be inspected every 5 years after the initial inspection date. So for example, if a school was inspected in 2025, then it has to be done again in 2030, 2035, and so on. If your district already started the inspections, that counts towards the requirement to have the first inspection done by that 2027 date. So who's required to perform these inspections? Unlike the annual requirement that I talked about in the last slide, this inspection requires a certified professional. And so the law specifically lays out who this should be: a certified testing, adjusting, and balancing technician, or other professionals that are listed here, such as an industrial hygienist. So once they complete the inspection and evaluation, what do you do with the report? The law, once again, requires districts to make the results available at a regular Board of Education public meeting, to post the checklist of the inspection on the Board of Education website and on each school website if you have a website for that school. And then you have to complete this DAS 5-year HVAC form. This is similar to an attestation that you've done your 5-year inspection and evaluation. So a few other things that I want to mention. We do not need the actual inspection report. We just need your district to fill out this form, which is linked here, and you'll receive it when you receive these slides, and we'll send a follow-up email. Another thing I wanted to mention is that districts will need to meet this requirement in order to be eligible for the category of non-priority list grants that fund heating, ventilation, and air conditioning upgrades. The third thing I want to mention is that districts do not have to do inspections for schools that will close within 3 years. And then lastly, there is a waiver process in place. So your district may request a waiver for a 1-year extension for one of 2 reasons. First, if there aren't enough testing, adjusting, and balancing technicians available, or the second reason is if you have an inspection scheduled for the following year. We'll put this waiver process in place as we get closer to the 2027 start date of this inspection requirement. If you have any questions on this, you can reach out to me. You can use the DAS Grants Administration at ct.gov email address, and Yadira and team will know to direct your question to me if it's about these inspections, evaluations, and reporting requirements. So with that, I'm done with my portion. I just want to say thank you all for taking the time to join us and hear about this. We still have a little bit more of our presentation, but just wanted to express my thanks to you all. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Yadira to talk about some of the OGA resources. Yadira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, so at the end of the slides, which again will be distributed to you and will be available on our website, you'll see many links on here. And I know that we have a lot of information and a lot of resources to the superintendents, and sometimes this can be confusing as you work through your projects, but we try to narrow it down to the most important ones. And you'll see we included links to the application process, both priority and non-priority, how we process estimated payments and final payments. We also have the checklist for those payment requests, which were mentioned earlier. And I think in the next slide, we have a few more, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe. I know we have a lot of slides for you and a lot of resources. So please reach out to us when you have questions and concerns. We really do try to do our best with the resources that we have to answer your questions and provide the guidance necessary as you work through these projects. Again, we want to make sure that you're able to do your jobs, that you're able to have safe schools for your children, and we definitely don't want to be a barrier. And this is more of a collaboration between the DAS, OGA, and our teams and the districts. And I would like for you to view us as more as a collaborator, and hopefully we can continue to work together on your projects whether they're current or future projects. So again, the best way of communicating with us is through our grants mailbox. As I mentioned before, we have a very small team, and sometimes with leaves and things of that nature, we want to ensure that no emails or questions are left behind and that we can get to them in a quick turnaround period. So we definitely encourage the mailboxes as your first resource to reaching out to us, and we'll be more than happy to assist you along the way. I see that our poll question has come up. I'm hoping that the districts are able to see that and that hopefully you do respond to it so that we can definitely start to tailor these presentations and these information sessions for your needs. And that's probably another question that will be coming to you about certain discussions that you would like to have, whether it's presentations on applications or plan review processes. It's our job to inform you, and it's our job to assist you throughout your projects. So please, I encourage you to answer the polls and to seek us out when necessary, and we'll be more than happy to help. Do we have anything else? Okay,
I
I
see
think
there's
that,
a question in the chat, Yadira.
okay.
So can HVAC grants be used for the inspections or follow-on implementation work? The HVAC grants under the category of non-priority list grants cannot be used to perform the 5-year inspection, but it is possible, depending on the type of implementation work, that you would be able to use the grant to do a non-priority list HVAC project, but that would be case by case. But the grant program does not fund the 5-year inspection and evaluation requirement. Amy, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything to that. Or I'll take silence
I think
as
that's
that was
it.
correct.
Yeah, that's correct. So the non-priority category is for upgrades to HVAC. So if the inspection results in the need to upgrade your HVAC system, that would qualify.
Okay. I do also see a hand up, so we can, at this time, we definitely can try to answer some questions for you. And I see it's Kristen Lund.
Christian, you should be able to unmute your mic now.
There it goes. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. I'm sorry, I would have used the chat function, but it says it's disabled for this meeting for me. So I don't know, maybe some other folks have the same notification, so I figured I'd let you know that. But I did have a couple of just quick general questions about using the non-priority for the HVAC now. HVAC can be pretty simple. It could be just a quick swap and replace. So is there going to be a minimum threshold for dollars that we could submit for and a maximum? And also, given that it could be, a simple project for our end, is it going to be the same application process as if you're doing a roof in a non-priority? So thanks for taking my questions.
Absolutely. So yes, you can apply through the non-priority on the monthly for the HVAC. There is no actual limit, right? It's based on your project cost and then also your reimbursement rate for your district. So similar to the roof, it's all based on what your needs are, what your costs are, and what your reimbursement is. The difference is that you will notice that now with the HVAC, because it falls under, as Amy mentioned, our statute, which is Chapter 173, the requirements are a bit more stringent than they were through the initial grants. But that's part of, if you've already done applications for roofs and projects and things like that through non-priorities, then you should be familiar with the process. It's not going to be any more different than one of those.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions or concerns that you would like addressed at this time? Okay, and I don't think there's anything in the Q&A function, is there? We don't want to miss anyone.
I see a couple more in there, Yadira.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, one would be, would we be able to use DRIP grant funding for the certified HVAC work?
DRIP grant funding?
So that's a separate state program that is not administered by DAS. So we can't really answer that one.
Okay, and then I see, can HVAC grants be used for the inspections or follow-on implementation work?
I think I got that one already, Yadira.
Oh, that's the one you did get. Okay.
Sorry, I went out of order.
Oh, okay, that's okay. I'm seeing one here. My understanding is that the new 1 year and 5 year, wait, this was the inspection one, or is that the same one? The
It's
IAQ
similar.
inspections take place of the previous 3 years IAQ site evaluations that were in place prior. Is this correct?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Okay. Okay, so if I don't see any I don't see any other hands raised or any other questions unless I missed one. So with that, I will give you your time back if you would like. Thank you very much for participating in this webinar and also for answering our poll question. Please know that we're working diligently to be able to put out as much information to the districts as possible, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us,
Thank-
for taking the time out of your day. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.